Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Season Ticket Podcast here on the seasonticket.ie. We hope you're well wherever you're joining us from. I'm Gareth Reynolds, and joining me on the show today from the heart of Ireland's ancient east, the silkiest tones to come out of Dundalk since Andrea Carr, it's Ronan Mullen. Good morning, Ronan.
How are things, Gareth? All's well here. Can't complain.
Good stuff. And joining us from the other side of the world, Clan and Nail record points scorer at underage level and heralded in Athboy as King of the Fela, it's David Smith. Good evening down under, David.
Morning, lads. How are you?
All good, all good.
Loving that intro, Gareth. Not remotely accurate, but
I don't think Andrea Cole would take too kindly to being compared to me, but I am totally happy to accept that comparison.
Yeah, I was more concerned about how you feel about being compared to her, but that's all right. As long as it wasn't comparing you to her brother, that's the main thing.
That's the main thing indeed.
So last time out, in the most recent episode, it was the two of you and Davey, and I know for anybody who tuned in, they would have heard you weighing up the prospects of last year's top four, and you arrived at the conclusion that last year's top four would probably be the same again this season. So with the benefit of hindsight, but not a huge amount of evidence, but still the benefit of hindsight, have you had any second thoughts on your predictions, or what are you thinking after the first 2 weeks?
I think it will be interesting to see City, just to see to what extent they are undercooked in the same way Man United were. I can't expect that they will be, given they probably have a bigger squad to draw upon, but at the same time, I don't think we've got a full picture of the league quite yet, just because Chelsea were obviously the story of the summer, all the signings they brought in, and yet you look at that team that they fielded against Liverpool, and it was pretty similar to the one that was taken the field last year, barring the two strikers. Like, the defence hasn't been improved on the pitch in the same way it had been in the market. Like, you presume Chilwell and Silva would make them a lot more robust at the back. The goalkeeper remains an issue. So I think it'll probably be, as with most seasons, a few weeks before we get a clear picture. But off the first couple of weeks of evidence, I think it's fair to say Liverpool are very much the team to beat, and have just picked up where they left off, really.
yeah,
David?
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think it's hard to judge. Like, you look at Spurs, even teams like that the first week, and then the contrast, or like Newcastle and then getting smashed. So the first 2 weeks is going to take a while to settle down. And still, since we last spoke, there's been a couple of signings. Like, Liverpool have brought in Thiago and Jota. It looks like there's going to be a lot more movement at those clubs we went through last week. Man City look busy again as well. So, I think obviously Manchester United had a very disappointing result in performance. But I'm still, I think a lot's dependent on transfers, whether we stick or twist with those predictions.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and I think it's impossible to have have like a prediction you're confident in, especially when the transfer window is going to keep going there for the next 2 weeks. And I think for a lot of teams as well, like, you can see the business that Liverpool did very quickly there, as you say, in the last couple of days even. I think for a lot of teams, given what the market is like, the last 2 weeks really is when you could see a lot of movement. People kind of biding their time to see what's going on, maybe look at what their competitors are doing or aren't doing, and going from there. But it's so incredibly tough to make a prediction. But I think for the purpose of this podcast, it might be best to just say we'll leave your predictions as they were. We won't go messing around with it yet. And we'll go for maybe like a best of the rest idea, where we can look at maybe a rundown of what, say, 5th to 10th might look like. I think like maybe an ideal place to start with that is Arsenal, because I would say that under Arteta, they've kind of been ahead of schedule and winning the FA Cup. I think that was something that nobody would have expected them to do, particularly given the run of games they had in the semi-final and the final, and even with Sheffield United in the quarter-final as well, they would have been given a tough run. But I think like they are someone who is going to push for top four, but maybe this year, under this kind of plan with Arteta, might just fall short in 5th. What thoughts have you got on that?
Yeah, they've improved so much, and I think we were having conversations about this when Unai Emery got the job, and I believe Arteta was interviewed for the post at that stage as well, and it seemed like the most natural fit that Arteta could sort of implant the ideology of Guardiola or something like it onto Arsenal, who seemed to have a good squad that were amenable to that kind of play, and then they went in a total opposite direction, probably a little bit of panic, I presume, getting a more experienced manager in Emery in. But I think if you canvas most Arsenal fans, they probably would have preferred if Arteta got the thing back then. But with the benefit of hindsight, maybe those extra couple of years gave him a bit more time to hone his craft, and he's really hit the ground running. And it's not as if there's been a huge overhaul of players. He's kind of just moved the furniture around a little bit and got them playing to his style. And I'm a sucker for social media videos, lads. You know this. And I was very taken by this Arsenal clip last week where they showed the goal against Fulham and the goal against Liverpool.
Yeah.
But they scored a goal like that against Man City as well. So this is
very,
very clearly drilled on the training ground. And this is modern football where defensive structures are almost taken as a given. Like, you can get your team set up, and that's what Jose Mourinho was known for in the early noughties, where he'd have you defensively robust and then leave basically the front three to win the game. Whereas what you can see with Arteta, and it was evidenced by Liverpool yesterday, that they have these patterns of play drilled in. And whereas Klopp has had a few seasons to do that, Arteta has done that in a matter of months, which is a remarkable achievement. So I don't know where the bar is, Gareth, for success for Arsenal this season. I presume top four would be a great achievement, but I think the sky's the limit for Arsenal in a long-term overview if they can keep up this rate of improvement.
Yeah, I think top four is the bar. I'm not sure that it would have been the bar for as many Arsenal fans had they not have won the cup. I do think, as I said, that they are maybe that was a little bit beyond maybe what expectations were previously. But I think the limitations come in midfield. As you say, he's done a fantastic job in coaching the players that by and large were already there when he took over. And I think, I can't remember which of the Sky pundits referred to them as the uncoachables, and to be fair, it really looked like that under Emery, particularly at the back. But I think that kind of pattern of play, particularly the ones that they've kind of been replicating for those Aubameyang goals, is kind of highlights the problem that they have in midfield, and that's where their limitations really are. They were, it's not by accident, I suppose, that they're bypassing the midfield and they're trying to create chances. And they're using the width to create as much space as they can then. But yeah, it's I mean, they were 16th in the league for chances created last year. And that just isn't going to cut it. So I would hope now that they'll get one, if not two, kind of creative players or ball carriers at least. I think they have improved their creativity with someone like Willian, who's oven ready, fits in there and knows what to do. But yeah, I think top four would be a fantastic achievement for them this year. I think under Arteta they've played 31 games and they've taken 63 points. So if you extrapolated that out over the course of a season, I know it's not like the main indicator as to how this year's going to go, but if you're on 63 points with 7 games to go this year, I think you'd be thrilled, especially considering 66 points was fourth last year. So still a lot of work to be done. You could see that against West Ham, but definitely feels more sustainable and a much more concrete blueprint in comparison to Emery.
Yeah, I think the midfield, you're right about that, where you look at the Arsenal midfielders and they're all kind of at the same level without having any top midfielders. It's such a big club, or a club who have just won the FA Cup, Community Shield, you would hope are challenging for the top four this year. I suppose they've got a very average range of players to choose from. I like Ceballos quite a lot, but aside from him, is it going to be him and Xhaka, the two main starters? They seem to have these weird situations with Torreira and Guendouzi where their attitudes being questioned. And I think you look at someone like Everton, I thought Arsenal might move for someone like Doucouré in the summer, just that box and ball carrier like you mentioned, or even Alan. I couldn't believe Everton signed him from Napoli. I really rate him. I think that will be the priority more so than anything else, because the rest of the team looks pretty good. I don't know, you probably know more than us, Gareth, about the new kind of defensive acquisitions, but they look pretty solid early doors. I suppose they're an improvement on the uncoachables anyway, but like, is there any particular midfielders they've been linked with or you think they should target?
Well, they've been linked with two mainly. It's Thomas Partey from Atletico, who's very much fits that ball carrier mold. I think when the links first came out, people thought because of his stature and everything, he's a defensive midfielder. But from what I've seen of him, he's not. And then somebody I've seen less of, but watched in the Champions League over the summer, was Houssem Aouar from Lyon.
Yeah,
and he's another guy who he's definitely more creative of the two they've been linked with, but he also carries the ball, and he has like, he looks like he can just slow a game down and speed up whenever he wants to. And I think it's something that De Bruyne does, not to compare the two of them, but something that De Bruyne does, something that David Silva did really well. Really controls the game. And if you're a team that want to play in the front foot, if you're gonna dominate possession, then you really need a player who can do that. So I think of the two of them, you'd be looking for one of those to come in. Like, there's plenty of smoke there, so we think that something might be happening. But I think as well, just on the defensive additions, obviously Saliba was signed last year, but Gabriel, who's come in this year, like, the two of them are really big units, 6'3", 6'4". Gabriel's left-footed. I don't think that's by accident that he's been signed and that a player of his stature has been signed. I think there's very obvious, kind of what I was saying about the blueprint as well in comparison to Emery. It seems that they've got confidence in what Arteta wants, and it's very kind of obvious style of recruitment, which I think gives a fan a lot of confidence to know that the man in charge has a plan about what he's doing and knows what he's doing. But I don't know, just on Xhaka and Ceballos too, I think they get a hard rap, particularly Xhaka, because Arsenal are playing with just a pair of players in midfield, and a lot of the top teams now have three, and so I think for a lot of times they're trying to cover the role of three players, and I think that's been overlooked a lot. I think they've done really well, particularly Ceballos after the restart last summer was top quality, like one of the best in that position in the league, I thought, for what he was doing. But I think that you would see the two of them actually take another step forward if they were able to sign a third, more, say, forward playing midfield player. But we'll wait and see.
It'll be a good test, I think, for them at Anfield next week. We'll see, especially if Thiago's kind of thrown in for his first start for Liverpool. I think if it's 2 against 3 as well, especially with someone of his caliber, I'm really excited to see how Arteta kind of sets up tactically for that one. Because he did a pretty good job last 2 meetings with Liverpool, the Community Shield. I thought Arsenal were really impressive. So yeah, I think patience is probably like the key thing now. It reminds me of like Liverpool under Klopp a couple of years ago, where you've all these other teams who are so far ahead in the development with big managers, big names. It's just trusting, as you said, when the signs are good. I think under Emery it was everything seemed like there was no clear direction. It was a bit all over the place. Whereas now it seems to be clear identity and style. So it's just, I think the FA Cup is like the best thing that ever could have happened last year. It just buys time, and there's none of this like, oh, it's so long without a trophy or whatever. So I think just patience is the main thing now for an Arsenal fan, and try and get top 4 without just managing expectations.
Yeah, I think the FA Cup gives Arteta a bit of credibility and gives people a belief in what he's doing. But actually, just to go back with what Ronan said too about Emery getting the job initially, in hindsight, you would say, I would say, yeah, I'm glad that maybe Arteta's getting it now as opposed to getting it, in 2018, because I think that the issues they had under Emery gave fans that kind of birth for patience. You kind of realise this is a bigger job than what some people might have expected, and so Arteta was afforded time anyway, I think, or was going to be afforded time. But as you say, the cup win gives him that little bit more now for patience with fans and with players too. Like, you see, I haven't heard a player say a bad word about him, and anybody who signed has said how important he's been in getting him there. Like money talks as well, but and the same with the Aubameyang contract. But they all really buy into what he's saying, and that can only be a good thing.
The Aubameyang contract's very significant in the sense that I know there wasn't a huge market for him this summer, given that clubs are a bit more cash strapped than they ordinarily be. But you would presume in the normal run of things that every top club in Europe would have been in for him. but the fact that he hung around speaks to the fact that he obviously has faith in the project, and he's captain. And like, I'm as guilty as anyone of pigeonholing Guardiola as a disciple, or pigeonholing Arteta as a disciple of Guardiola. And I said it already in the show, but like, you don't know. Like, he might have his own style, and you mentioned the midfield, bypassing the midfield, Gareth, and Liverpool have had great success with that, using the wide channels as their source of creativity, and that seems to be like Liverpool. It's borne out the fact that Liverpool are champions. I know they've probably moved a bit more. I don't want to discredit the likes of Wijnaldum and Henderson and Milner, but in reality, the creativity comes from the wide areas and then that front three. So maybe Arsenal are following along different lines when you've got Bellerin. I don't know if he's hanging around, Gareth. I know there was some talk that he might move on, and then Kieran Tierney is playing in the back three when he's fit, but like in the long term, you would presume he will take that left wing position when Saka probably will end up further forward. So they've actually got a lot of options. Midfield would be nice to address, and I'm sure they will when the money's right. One question, and I'm just interested, actually two questions. Like Lucas Torreira and Guendouzi as one sort of midfield quandary, like as a non-Arsenal fan and just watching them every now and then, I was always impressed with both of them as busy players, good on the ball, and kind of basically no games ever pass without you noticing both of them playing. So I always thought they were quite impactful. And then the Emi Martinez, Bernd Leno thing, I don't know, you could probably speak to this, Gareth. I've been watching them every week, but I was a lot more convinced by what Martinez was doing in terms of coverage of the box, assurance on shot stop, and even keeping that defensive line in order, as opposed to Leno, who's a good, like, he's agile and he's a decent shot stopper, but I wouldn't say he's necessarily won me over. But like, Arsenal have made their decision. They've got a lot of money for Martinez, and that's actually great credit to them that they've taken basically an academy player and turned it into 20 million quid. But I wonder what you think about the Torreira Guendouzi thing and the goalkeeping situation.
Yeah, I think the Torreira one is, it's kind of unfortunate in a way, because he had a great World Cup for Uruguay, and that was the time that he was signing then, and I think he had a fantastic first 6 months to the start of his Arsenal career, and kind of that first half of it, of that first season, I suppose, culminated in the 4-2 win against Spurs at the Emirates, and he scored in that. And I think everybody was kind of blown away by how, as you say, how busy he was. He's very good at turning over the ball. He's doing the same against Liverpool when they came to the Emirates, and he looked like the kind of guy that they've been missing for a long time. And he got injured then and didn't really feature as much in the second half of the season. And when he came back the following year under Emery, start of last season, he was playing further forward. I'm not sure what the thinking was behind that, whatever decision Emery was kind of trying to make with that, but he wasn't able to impose himself, and I suppose would have struggled, I think, anyway, to impose himself even in a good team playing that position, never mind in a team that was struggling. He got injured again. He broke his ankle, and he just hasn't featured under Arteta. So I'm not like, I always kind of liked him, and I thought maybe he's been unfortunate with injuries when he's picked them up, particularly the first time around when he picked up an injury when he was in such good form. It seems like it's someone that doesn't fit the kind of criteria of player that Arteta wants. Guendouzi goes back to the Brighton game where he had a bit of disciplinary issues, and there's reports of things that he was saying to Neil Maupay on the pitch and stuff, and I think that's the first time we've really seen Arteta kind of stamp his authority with a player, because when Arteta first took the job, he talked about non-negotiables, and he's talked about them consistently since he joined in December. And I think one of those is the humility and respect in the way you conduct yourself as a player. And I think Guendouzi has always had a bit of kind of disciplinary issues since he was a youth player. He's got a bit of a record for it, and I think it was just a step too far this time around. And from anything I've read, it's been a case of not really apologising for what he's done or not recognising where he was in the wrong. And I think for Arteta, it must just be a decision of look, you either behave the way we want you to, or you're out. So I think that's why you see him being linked with moves away. But I mean, I think the Torreira one is unfortunate because he's young, and I think if he does go somewhere, he could still have a really good he could have really good time at a really good level. The Guendouzi one is disappointing because you can see he's got like a really raw talent. And actually, when Arteta joined, I thought Guendouzi might be one of the ones, along with Maitland-Niles, who really benefits from this. You can see the ability there, but they just need to be coached. And I thought that he would take a huge step forward under Arteta. But if the manager thinks it's not working and if it's not helpful for the squad overall, then I've got no problem with him moving somebody on if it has to be done. I think that ruthlessness is something that was missed for a long time at Arsenal. So it's almost refreshing in a way to see it come back. The goalkeeper situation is strange because without Leno getting injured for that same Brighton game, we never would have seen Martinez, and he probably would have left anyway, maybe for a couple of million, because he does want to be a number one. I mean, he's just turned 28. He was at Arsenal for 11 years and spent more time on loan than at the club itself. I think he only played 38 games for Arsenal by the time he was leaving, and he made his debut in 2012. So tells you a lot about what the majority of his career was like. I think that given how good he was and how important he was, especially in the cup run, people forget maybe how good Leno was for the rest of the season. I would have said that Leno was probably going to be player of the year until he got injured. They are different kind of profiles of keepers, though, and I do think that Martinez is better under a high ball. I feel a lot more confident, given how badly Arsenal struggled with set pieces and conceding goals off them last year. I feel a lot more confident with Martinez between the sticks when balls come in. But I don't know. Again, like they have a really kind of forward-thinking team of coaches there. They must have some reason for keeping Leno. I also think that you're never going to get 20 million again for Martinez, and maybe in some cases you'd be mad not to take it. And he was always going to push a lot more strongly to leave if he wasn't my first choice versus leaving Leno on the bench. I don't think at this point they could afford to have two keepers worth the same value and one of them only playing every week. So it was a decision that had to be made. But I do wonder about the future of that position at Arsenal, because David Raya at Brentford is someone who they've been linked with after Martinez's sale, and he's someone who worked with your man Pavon, who's the goalkeeping coach at Arsenal now. He'd come from Brentford and worked with Raya, and the fact they're trying to sign him now, I wonder if they see him as like another long-term solution. Maybe Leno will play for a couple of years and they'll try and move him on, because that goalkeeping role for a lot of teams is something that's kind of it's like an untapped resource in comparison to like bringing in your kind of modern fullbacks and all the rest of it. So I think that Leno will be fine at number one for the next couple of years. Like I think by and large he has been very good for Arsenal, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that change, or if that was something that Arteta wanted to change under, say, like a 3-year plan.
Yeah, good stuff.
I take your word for it, Gareth. That's a comprehensive answer on the goalkeeping, because again, I can't claim to see him every week, but I just thought Martinez had probably earned the right to start the season given how fundamental he had been to close the last season. But that is a good point on the values. It's kind of a now or never thing, and you're probably more likely to get money for Martinez than you were for Leno. So it stands to reason, and there are other areas of the pitch where they need to improve. So goalkeeping is probably not the number one port of call. There's not that big of a chasm between the two where you'd have to necessarily say it's detrimental to let one of them go, and they can reinvest that 20 million in an area of need. So it was a shrewd bit of business. I was just struck by how ruthless Arteta was with dropping the foreign player at the end of last season for the return in Bernd Leno. But like 2 wins from 2, you can't complain. Arsenal are motoring, Gareth.
Yeah, no, so good. So far, so good. I look forward to seeing him in his first year, and I hope that, all going well, they'll actually have like a season without the stops and starts of last year. And I think like for a guy who's in his first managerial job, he's had a hell of a 9 months and done fantastically well. So I hope, I hope he just gets to really impose himself now on the next 9 months and see how it goes.
Where are we predicting then? Are we thinking Arsenal? Are you thinking Gareth? Do you think they will finish in the top 4, or do you think it's?
I think they'll push it. I think they'll push for top 4, but I think they might just finish 5th, because I'm not sure in terms of depth and even quality that they do have on the bench, if they were to progress to later stages of Europa League, I'm not sure if they'll be able to balance that with the Premier League, but we'll wait and see. I think they'll be thereabouts, but I think they might just slip into fifth.
Do we move on to
What about Spurs?
Spurs? Yeah.
Oh, we have to do it, Gareth, I'm afraid.
What about them?
Are you fearful, or what do you reckon? Do you think they will, like, off the back of last week, you're looking at them and they just look so lethargic, and it was almost as if like they threw their hat at the game after they went 1-0 down, but then having watched Man United and a few other teams in their first game, you're like, these lads are just not at the level fitness wise. I don't even think it was a tactical thing from Tottenham last week, because you saw how ferocious they were on the break yesterday or on Sunday, and Southampton, albeit Southampton played into their hands, and I don't know about this high line. I don't know if all teams seem to be persisting with high lines and playing out from the back as a means of, as if you can't play progressive football without, pressing right up on the halfway line. And you think after Son's second or third goal, Southampton would have been like, let's back up a little bit here. He scored the same goal 4 times. Yeah. But that all being said, I think if Spurs can manoeuvre themselves into counter-attacking positions like that, there's few teams in the league that can stop them, because you saw Harry Kane. I think the commentator said he was turning into Glenn Hoddle or Christian Eriksen, spraying passes from midfield. So I think Spurs look potent on the break, but the obvious counter to that is most teams are going to go to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and sit back, and then where do they go then? They don't seem to have much creativity. Mourinho's never been known for having tactical acumen that can break a low block down. So that would be my main concern. Gareth Bale is a shrewd sign, I think, given it's only a loan deal and it's a bit of a shot to nothing. It will boost morale. Reguilon is a very good signing, I think. But if he's anyway successful, Real Madrid are just going to buy him back for 20 million euros. So it's basically another expensive loan deal. So you'd wonder about Tottenham's business long term. Would any other manager get rid of Dele Alli? I know he probably hasn't hit the heights that people expected him to, but still, he's getting most Premier League teams, if not squads. So I think that's a classic Jose Mourinho move to like isolate one of the fan favourite players and get him out of the club. So it'll be interesting. Time will tell on that. But they do look potent. They've recruited quite well, but I think the jury's still out until we have a bigger body of work to judge on what kind of job he's actually doing there.
It's funny though, it's almost an anti-Mourinho team looking at the minute in terms of like they're much better going forward than they are defensively, which is like the antithesis to what we usually expect from Mourinho. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how they evolve this season, because you look at like they brought in Doherty, Reguilon's very good going forward generally. Like it looks like they're almost trying to get back to those like bombarding full backs they had when Kyle Walker and Danny Rose were kind of in their prime there a few years ago. And I actually like Højbjerg as well. I know he's had a bit of a mixed start, but I think they needed that bit of steel in midfield. I think Bale, particularly when you talk about that counter-attack and like with Kane dropping deeper, hitting teams on the break, like Bale is tailor-made for that. I think in away games, especially Spurs, are going to be quite dangerous, but I just think the centre defence is still an issue. I don't think Eric Dyer's he's kind of a strange one where it's like you don't know what he is anymore. Is he a midfielder or a centre back? I know he wants to be a centre back, but I'm not convinced by him as a centre back at all.
He's just Phil Jones. He's just Phil Jones 2.0. Like he's never convinced. He's always been promised, but then you look at him and these should be his prime years, and he's never kicked on. There's a few Spurs players like that, I think.
Yeah, I think the Ali one as well is weird when like if you've watched the All or Nothing documentary, like Mourinho really seems to have quite a good relationship with him, and I know you can probably see both sides where he's constantly kind of teasing Ali about his laziness and his poor attitude in training, but then like he tells him that he was told, Alex Ferguson told him to sign it for Manchester United, and it is kind of a strange one. I think that something seems to have broken down. He was taken off at half time in the first game. He's been left out of 2 subsequent squads. So like the writing, apparently PSG are kind of interested in lining up a loan bid. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to watch that, because can they, like, I don't think Spurs are in a position where they can really afford to be letting Dele Alli go out on loan for a year. It just seems like wouldn't have been possible to fathom that a year ago, 2 years ago. So, but yeah, I agree. It's like the Dyer thing where, and I actually feel Davison Sanchez is a bit the same, where I really thought he was going to be a top centre back, but hasn't really kicked on and convinced in the last couple of years either. So they're kind of a mixed bag at the minute, Spurs. Gareth, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think same as I suppose we were saying about these predictions in general. It is so tough, and particularly when they were their two performances so far have been at such contrasting ends of the scale. Yesterday's game was strange, though. It was almost like when you're playing five-a-side and all the shite lads get tired, and they were just like, as Ronan said, they scored 4 identical goals, and after the second one, you want to really be questioned why you're still doing the same thing over and over again. But with Southampton's backline, I mean, but yeah, it's not to take away from 4 very good goals on the break, and it's rare to see a player score 4 and then for the same player to set it up each time. Like, it's very impressive. So it's just so hard to know going forward, like, how consistent they'll be in doing that. I think you would be hard pressed to see another team defend as poorly as Southampton did in that second half yesterday. So they may not get it as easy. But they've always been hard to beat under Mourinho. I think since he's come in, up until now, they're, I think, form wise, they're maybe like 4th best in the league. So I think like they've maybe, because of the way they play, they can be overlooked or maybe dismissed a little bit as challenging for top 4, because it's not. It's at such a contrast with the way that the best teams in the league play by and large. But yeah, I think the big thing, if I was a Spurs fan, I suppose, would be that Levy's obviously brought him in to win something, because I don't think he'd get Mourinho in otherwise. And I think that he'd have to do it this year because, historically the third year is might not end too well. But yeah, I think they really need to get a trophy into the cabinet. Like, they've had an FA Cup and 2 League Cups in 35 years. So if they want to, if this is going to be like some sort of project with Mourinho, then I don't think you're going to see anything that's that can be described as progress without somebody holding a trophy. So yeah, we'll see how it goes over the course of the year. I think as well in their business, like, I think Matt Doherty is a fantastic signing, and I do wonder if those kind of, as you say, the bombarding fullbacks are something that he's gone back to, because he knows it's something that Kane operated so well with under Pochettino before, and it might be an easy fix to their problems. But yeah, bringing Bale in, if they're going to play counter-attacking football, could be a lot of fun to watch. And I just think, though, that between that being a loan and Reguilon coming in with the buyback option, it as you're saying, Ronan, I don't know if it's done with the long-term view, if it all is a bit short-term. It's a bit like Morata's did at Juve. So if Real want them back, like, they'll take them back. So I'm not sure. Maybe they'll do more business now in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, they're just so hard to. They're so hard to nail down, and with someone like Ali being left out of the squad, like, he's such a popular player among Spurs fans, it's that typical Mourinho scapegoat. It'll be interesting. I suppose it is underpinned by Mourinho's relationship with his squad as much as anything else. So we'll see how that develops over the course of the year, and that will very much influence if they're going to challenge for top 4 or not, I suspect.
Funny that, like, you actually look at their team and they're very well balanced. And like, it's very good. I don't know, maybe the depth is lacking, but like, that front 3 now is potentially Son, Kane and Bale. The 2 new fullbacks, I think, as we mentioned, like, they've still got Lloris, who's very experienced, like a World Cup winning goalkeeper. The centre defence, maybe, I think, would still do some work, but they have, like, I think Lo Celso is a good player in midfield. They've got Winks is tidy. He's brought in Højbjerg, who seems like a really Mourinho type midfielder. And then Ndombele, as Mourinho's been talking him up, he scored the winner in the Europa League during the week. So I think they're not a million miles off. And about that long-term thing, I don't know I think if I was a Spurs fan, like, it feels like the whole Pochettino project, it was incredible, and he took the club forward so much, but it was a long-term plan. And then at the end of the day, unfortunately, I don't think anyone really wanted to see that go badly, but he left without winning anything. So I think it's a case where like maybe as an Arsenal fan, it's felt like that at times as well, Gareth. Maybe over the past decade compared to earlier years, where it feels like something's been building for years without actually ever fulfilling that promise that was shown. So maybe short term, maybe you want to see a manager come in and make short term signings would you rather bring in Gareth Bale or a 20-year-old winger from, who could potentially be world class in 4 or 5 years, or do you want the finished product now? I think that's like the balance it's tough to find for Spurs at the minute.
It's absolutely about finding the balance. I think though, I don't know, like in the years that Pochettino was at Spurs, if you were to compare it to Arsenal, like he was very evidently building something that was progressing. Like we saw how much they improved, and it culminated with that Champions League final. And so I think it's actually unfair to compare that Spurs project to what was going on at Arsenal, because Arsenal were very much in decline during that period as well. And I would think that for anybody who thinks that, obviously a lot is made of Pochettino not winning anything, and I think it's unfair actually, because he's changed, at least for the next few years anyway, how Spurs are viewed. He's changed the expectations of that club. He's brought them into a new stadium, and I think it's taken them to a whole different level that they wouldn't be on and wouldn't have been on without him. So I think that he deserves a huge amount of credit for that. But I don't know. I suppose like performances will convince how you feel about the Bale move in particular. But when I first saw it, I thought it smacked a bit of Alexis Sanchez going to United, and you're not really sure how it's going to pan out. It's big money for a short-term move, and you're not sure how it's going to go, particularly a player who's so attacking to be coming under a Mourinho side. Yeah, it's impossible to tell. But I think Højbjerg was a great signing as well, actually, in addition to Doherty, because he is that very much like Mourinho-esque player in the middle. And he's only 25, but he's been around forever. Like I think he started at Bayern when he was 17, so he's a really good experienced player to bring in too. But yeah, I think that they'll finish 6th on the caveat that all's good with Mourinho and the players throughout the year.
Ronan, what do you think?
I think in my mind before the season, just given the trajectory Arsenal were on, I had them to finish 5th again with a real push for top 4, and again that mix could really change by Christmas. We'll probably have a clearer indication by then, but I think that's probably the money where it should be. And then Spurs again 6th, you'd have to say, because Wolves are obviously only getting to their transfer business now, given they've offloaded a lot of players. But I think Everton are obviously the sneaky team to keep an eye on. But I think the top 6 is probably entrenched again in the same way that old top 4 was about 10 years ago. But like, you can't safely say anything about Tottenham, because it does feel a lot more game to game than it did under Pochettino, where, as you lads have said, it was very much a long-term project. And you always wonder, like, I think Spurs, there have been some soundings that they're looking to sell the club. There's a few little things, indicators. The Amazon documentary obviously pitched them to a whole new audience. The new stadium, they have this link up with the NFL. It's a brilliant stadium, and it's a very attractive proposition for a would-be buyer, I would presume. And then even things like Alex Morgan signing for the women's team, like again, just bringing eyeballs to the Tottenham Hotspur Inc. kind of thing. So you just wonder, like, these signings again, Bale, that's making news on ESPN and SportsCenter in America, this kind of stuff, in the same way that, as David said, like Ferran Torres or someone isn't going to make headlines for Tottenham worldwide. So I do think their business is a little bit out of kilter than it would be. Like, I'm sure Pochettino was looking at this and thinking, where was this investment after we got to the Champions League final? You sent me back into that season with basically the same squad, and Ndombele came in, but Eriksen was on his way out the door. So, like, you just do wonder about Tottenham's long-term ethos. And the reason Reguilon came in on basically an expensive loan is because Mourinho doesn't care if Madrid buy him back, because by the time Madrid do that, he'll be gone. So it is a bit grim. But I'd say at this point, and you touched on it there, Gareth, Spurs fans probably just want a trophy. They don't care. By hook or by crook, if Mourinho wins them a League Cup or an FA Cup this year and gets them into the Champions League and leaves, they'll be happy enough with that. Which is kind of a little bit of a grim state of affairs, but at the same time, understandable. So the short answer after all that is, I'm not sure, but I would say Tottenham for 6th this season.
I think I'm in the same boat there. As we said, like it is quite game to game with them. So I'd be interested to see. I could see them winning the Europa League in a way, just with that setup with Bale coming in, the counter attacking. If that is what he's building towards, which the signs indicate he is, I think that would be really suit him in the Europa League. And Mourinho's got good pedigree, obviously, in European tournaments like that. So yeah, one to keep an eye on. But I think, as Ronan said, we are moving back maybe towards that traditional top 6, even though the chasing pack are improving so much, and like the caliber of signings now coming into the league is incredible. When you look at Everton and Wolves, like it's ludicrous. I think Wolves are signing a right back from Barcelona, but it's just the way things are going. But I do think the big 6 with their managers, and I think I'd be surprised if any of them fell out of it without, as you said, Gareth, like things going bad for Mourinho or like basically a manager losing his job in that top 6, that things will go that badly. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Who do we think then are out of the chasing pack? Would you, if you think one team's going to kind of disrupt that top 6, would it be Wolves or Everton or Leicester?
It's well, so we'll say like of the rest, I've got 4 teams here in Wolves, Leicester, Everton, Sheffield United. I think that just to start with Sheffield United, actually, I don't think that they'll be making the push that they did last year, but I think given that they ended up 9th, people would forget that actually they sustained the Europa League push for a huge part of the season. But their downfall is the chances that they create. Like I think they're very admirable defensively, but they I think they had the fewest shots recorded of anybody in the league last year. So I just wanted to like acknowledge that how good they were, but I think we can discount them from disrupting the top 6 this year.
Yeah.
Despite how good a project they have going there. I actually think of Wolves, Leicester, and Everton, the team that could push them most this year is Wolves. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, the Sheffield one, like it's that thing of like managing expectations again, where like to stay up for them is probably a good season this year. Like they overachieved hugely last year. They were like, bar Liverpool winning the league, they would have been the story of the season. But I don't know. Like I even look at could Leeds this year maybe do what Sheffield did last year? It's another weird one with expectations, because we're so used to Leeds as such a big club, and they've been so well publicised, well they've done under Bielsa and like their identity and things. But it's 2 wins from 2 from them. There's obviously like defensive issues and that, but maybe they'll push for the top 10. Like I'm not saying top 6 or anything. I don't think that's feasible, but yeah, I think Sheffield, like mid-table, is probably another fantastic season for them again.
I think so.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people are actually, you talk about perspectives changing quickly, but a lot of people are looking at them and thinking they could be relegation candidates after the first couple of weekends. So I think people need to hold their horses a little bit. I think they've earned enough credit, but I suppose there is precedent for it. Like you remember that Reading team that came up under Steve Coppell, finished, was it 7th? And then, but the next season they were staving off relegation. So it is a tough one. Second season syndrome is a real thing. And in this season where you're playing, top players are playing games twice a week, every week till the Euros, Sheffield United squad's going to be a little bit stretched. But Wolves is an interesting one, Gareth. Talk about projects like what Nuno Espirito Santo has done there. Granted, in the Championship it was a little bit skewed by the fact that they were spending Premier League money, but since they've come into the Premier League, they've felt like a Premier League team from the get-go. Like they play such great football, and he's just an amazing coach. I think he's pegged for a big job. Like he'd be tailor-made for Spurs after Mourinho, I presume. I'd say that's what they're keeping an eye on. But I know you're picking them to break in, but they have been depleted a bit now by Matt Doherty was a key player for them, and Jota, sneaky business where I'm not sure if they were. He's not one of these players where he's definitely leaving this summer. I think they had probably planned with him in their team for this season. So I know Douglas Costa from Juventus has been linked as the replacement, that'd be a pretty exceptional replacement if he can stay fit. And then Nelson Semedo, as David mentioned there, a nice, not a bad replacement for Matt Doherty if they can get him in as well. So I wouldn't back against Nuno working miracles again and getting that team up near the top of the league. Like 7th isn't beyond reach, and that's what we're talking about if we're putting Arsenal and Spurs 5th and 6th. So between them, Everton, who I don't know what you thought about the James Rodriguez signing, but I did have a little bit of, this is a bit like Deco coming to Chelsea that time, where he was good for when the sun was shining, he was decent for a few weeks, and then he just threw his hat at it after when it got cold. And then, but Alan and Doucouré bring such steel to that midfield that you're going to think, oh, perfect, that's going to let James Rodriguez do his thing. Calvert-Lewin, who I never really pegged as a prolific goal scorer, has been banging them in to start the season, so that bodes well. Richarlison, bags of talent. If he can find a consistency, he's going to be a top player as well. Seamus Coleman, Garrett, looks like Seamus Coleman from 10 years ago. I don't know how long he can keep this going, and the Matt Doherty versus Seamus Coleman argument will be a moot point if the form line continues the way it's going. But Jesus, the top half of this Premier League season, it's about as stacked as I can remember. And even the bottom teams, like the so-called bottom teams, have some quality as well. So there's a lot of, I know people make light of this best league in the world tag, and Sky and BT are quick to peddle that. But it's hard to argue with it when you look at the players on show. And Lionel Messi was on the brink of joining Man City, so that would have been case closed if that deal had gone through. But yeah, I think we're in for a phenomenal season, and that top half in particular is going to be mouth-watering, I'd say.
Yeah. Well,
so, sorry, just to ask then, of that kind of remaining bunch, say of like Wolves, Leicester, Everton, who would both of you choose as maybe that kind of team that will rattle the top 6?
I'm like, I don't know. You look at any of them. Leicester's another one where I think they probably overachieved last year, or almost like you said with the Arteta, the Cup coming so soon. I think people expected Rodgers to do quite a good job at Leicester, or excited about him, but maybe they progressed faster than anyone kind of expected last year. I think like it's easy to forget, but like things were so skewed and strange after the restart. But like Wolves and Leicester were both, and Sheffield were hell for leather even for the Champions League places for a little while. It was looking Wolves in particular and Leicester. So I'm not sure. I think Leicester have looked pretty good. I think they've Man City next up, so that'll be probably a good test for them. Wolves again, like I thought, as Ronan said, like they looked a bit depleted after those departures, but they brought in Fabio Silva, who's very highly rated as well. They have Jimenez as a superstar. I think he's one of the best. He's in that weird thing where he's probably not going to get a move to be a leading man at one of the top 6, but he's too good to be a backup striker as well. So. And then you look at Neves, like Wolves are littered with that talent. And you mentioned Nuno is probably, he's destined for a top 6 job as well. So I can't really separate those 3 or 4 teams. I think Everton's business has been fantastic as well. That midfield 3 is as good as you'd find in a lot of top European teams and other leagues probably now on paper. I think, the James thing, like it's in danger of becoming like Harry Redknapp and Crancher, like him and Ancelotti. But it looks like a great move, especially those 2 guys behind him. I think Alan is I think he's going to be one of the standout midfielders this season in the league, from what I've seen of him playing for Napoli, and just the instant impact kind of he's made.
I think probably. I think.
Sorry, Ronan, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's hard to look past Everton just on the form, but in podcasts to come, we'll probably have a clear indication of where they're actually at. But like, you'd have to think they're nailed on for that next position. But I just think the consistency of Leicester, and you talk about post-lockdown and they bottled the Champions League narrative, which I thought was a bit unfair because like they were going into that closing run of 10 games without their first choice right back, first choice left back, first choice centre back. James Maddison is probably their best player, short of Jamie Vardy maybe. So like, I think most teams would struggle if you took those components out of their team. So if Leicester can get a fit squad together for the bulk of this season, I think they would probably be my pick for 7th place at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think it's a bit of a sliding doors moment for Leicester in a way, because to finish fifth last year, I think they'd actually did quite well because they only won 4 of 17 in the second half of last season. Like as you say, Ronan, they're absolutely depleted. But when they're at full strength, I mean, like they have, Madison, Tillmans, Barnes, Ndidi. Like when they're on form, I think they're one of the most dangerous. I would actually have that midfield over Everton's, and I just think I suppose they didn't have Europe last year. They're going to have Europa League this year, and a big concern would be that if there were injuries, especially going forward, like Jose Perez and Amari Gray maybe aren't at the level that they need to be if they're going to be taking pressure off Vardy, chipping him a few goals, or filling in the gaps if somebody is injured. But as you say, like I think that if they can hold together a fit squad, they'll be thereabouts. I just wonder if Europe might be kind of taxing on a squad that has struggled with injuries anyway. And that's kind of why I looked at Wolves as maybe the team who could rattle the top 6, because they don't have European football, and while they have obviously sold a few key players, like as you said, like Silva, they brought in exciting prospect, Marcel from Lyon, who is going to fit right into the back line, and they've got your man Hoover as well from Liverpool. Yeah. So they're kind of they've got good numbers there across the back. They've got Johnny coming back in January then, who obviously has been a big miss for them. But I think like they've kind of just they came up, finished seventh again, and quietly have been like asserting themselves as one of the top sides. But so I would have them to finish maybe like they'll push the top 6, and it's I think Everton are a strange one because that midfield does look totally regenerated. Like it was a very discouraging end of the season for them last year. I don't think they were great to watch in restart, but they took 17 points from their first 24 when Ancelotti took over, and then got thumped at the bridge over the lockdown, and that kind of like set the tone for the rest of their season. But I think it's a big year for Calvert-Lewin because he's only 23. He scored 13 goals last year and got the England call-up, and so confidence will obviously be high after the start of the season too. But it's a test for him now to sustain that, and like you said, there's a huge reliance then on guys like Richarlison to contribute as well throughout the year. And I think like he's probably their best player now, I think, and you're just looking for a consistent season out of him. But I just think it's the lack of European football, I say, that puts Wolves just a small bit ahead for me.
And is there any wild cards from the bottom half? Like I think Leeds are probably the pick of. I think they're everyone's second team, which seems ridiculous to say given Leeds are one of the most hated clubs in England. But I think in terms of watching them, like as a neutral, I think you just saw against Fulham at the weekend. It's going to be electric every week, win or lose. So I think they're worth keeping an eye on. Just a wild card, lads, for you. Mikel Antonio is a serious player. Like I don't know what the crack is with this guy. He's not even a striker, but again, I was making the point about Torreira and Guendouzi just as an aside that have you ever watched a game that Mikel Antonio was playing and thought, oh, that passed me by, I didn't notice him? It's like he gets involved in absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think he merits a move. Like he might be West Ham's main man and he might be happy enough with that, but I think in terms of available players within the Premier League, I think he's an excellent player, and probably he doesn't issue his own come and get me please, but I think if I was him or if I was his management, I'd be like, leaking these stories out. Remember Kevin Doyle used to be linked with Arsenal the whole time, even though there was never a word about it.
Yeah,
I think I'd be doing that if I was Mikel Antonio's agent. So that's just my main takeaway from the weekend of Premier League. I'm like, this guy,
that's a bold claim.
He deserves some credit.
I think he does. Sorry, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, what about relegation? I would say that Fulham and West Brom would look. I expect them both to be in trouble. I think Fulham are going to be propping up the rest of the table. I think they look exactly like they look every other year. They've struggled in the Premier League, and then I think West Ham. Antonio might be getting his mover on it because I reckon West Ham could be in trouble. Or I think them or Burnley could be an interesting one. Brighton look pretty good. They beat Newcastle 3-0. I don't think it would be like 7 or 8 teams sucked in at the bottom again this year. I think it'll be probably Fulham, West Brom, and one other.
I think Aston Villa have strengthened, and keeping Jack Grealish is probably, I don't want to use the cliche that it's as good as a new signing, but it basically is, because he was as convinced as anybody that he was out the door. Remember after that Arsenal game, Gareth, he was interviewed on the touchline and they asked him, is this going to be your last game? And he basically said, yeah, and now he's still there. So it's another year with him, and you'd like to think that's enough quality to keep them afloat. Sheffield United worth keeping an eye on. If they don't invest, it's hard to see them running with that squad again. And same for Burnley, who I was glad to see Jimmy Dunn, who went to the same school as me, getting his Premier League debut for Burnley. But the reality is they were totally outclassed by Leicester, and I'd say there'll be a few results like that coming their way if they don't invest a bit more. But having said that, like, Burnley started last season really badly and finished strong. That's kind of Sean Dyche's MO. But you wonder how long he's going to hang around if the checkbook's not brought out there, because he's done wonders with that club for not much reward. So yeah, I think Fulham and West Brom sadly are nailed on given the Irish contingent, but I think they're probably going to go back down. And I think Burnley might be, unless something changes before the transfer deadline, I think Burnley might be joining them.
Burnley feels like a project maybe it's gone stale a little bit, because you haven't seen a huge amount of change or progression in that team. And actually, in terms of league finishes, I think they've slowly declined. And not to say that it didn't overachieve to begin with under Dyche, but I think Fulham look absolutely scrap, like, are brutal. But they shouldn't have been promoted in the first place. They were very lucky to get up in the first place. The end of the championship last year was Brentford like just shot themselves in the foot. But of all the teams that could have gone up from the championship last year, I don't think Fulham could believe that it was them. They must be like pinching themselves that they're actually there. But David, you're absolutely right. Like, I think they're a copy of the team that came up 2 years ago, and they're equally as bad as them. Like, they're impressively bad. Couldn't believe how bad they were against Arsenal. And actually, I think the result against Leeds flatters them, because they got battered. So I wouldn't expect them to, even if they did improve a bit, not going to be enough. And I think it's hard to say about West Brom, because I don't know. I think like Bilic has got a bit about him, or can have a bit about him, and I'd be interested to see how they kind of settle into it. Over the first kind of 10 games or so. But if I was Burnley and if I was Villa, I'd be looking over my shoulder. I think that Sheffield United will be fine, but I do think they'll need to sign a striker, because they rely on, I think, like, in terms of strike rate, as I was saying earlier about the chances they create, in terms of strike rate, like, Billy Sharp is their main man, and he doesn't even start. But McGoldrick is better at linking up the play, so they're going to need someone who can put the ball in the back of the net. And but I think they'll be okay, because they've been so good at the back. But Burnley and Villa will be a bit under threat, even with Grealish signing on. And I'm not sure, even though he signed the contract, how long he'll actually stay for. Like, that's just securing his value more than anything else. So
almost as if he's not that loyal, Gareth. Sorry.
It's almost as if he's done this before, yeah.
There's nothing in his history to suggest that he's capable of such treachery, but
We'll see. Yeah. So if you're going top four, you have your top four picked of Liverpool, City, Chelsea, and United. Was that it?
That was it. Yeah.
And then we have Arsenal, Spurs, and then 7, 8, 9. You're looking at a mix of Everton, Leicester, and Wolves.
Yeah, it's hard to predict what order, I suppose, but I think they'll probably be the three.
Yeah, it's hard to even think who the next best would be. It's.
Yeah, I thought Newcastle were looking pretty good with their signings and stuff, and they started well, but then that result against Brighton was a shot in the foot. So I think, it might be a mix. It might be a drop off, might be a top 9 rather than a top 10 this year. And then I don't know, it could be Leeds. I might go for Leeds for pure entertainment factor. They might finish 10th, but they could just easily finish 15th. It's and hard to know. It's just a bit manic there, but it's going to be an enjoyable ride, I think, regardless for them.
Okay, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, like, because I think Brighton could be really good. I think Graham Potter is actually a really interesting guy, but then I also think a huge amount is going to come down to like squad depth this year more than any other year because the season went on for so long. Like players now are more fit than they would be generally after a pre-season.
Yeah,
Because it's off the back of that lockdown. I think like they it'll be like whoever gets that kind of second wind come February or March time could really make a later run if it was for like say the top six or for a top four or whatever. It's a whole different season. What do you think of as well about teams that have maybe performed better because there's no fans in the ground? Have you talked about it at all? Or?
yeah. I don't know. It probably suits certain teams playing like away from home, playing like more negative football or parking the bus. I think like people like Mourinho will probably get away with it more. Or like Chelsea set up pretty negatively, I thought, against Liverpool. I don't know. I think it'll suit managers like that who want to sit in or play a low block or whatever because they don't have their own fans. It kind of somewhat neutralizes the home advantage in that sense, even tactically as well as everything else that goes with it. I don't know what you think, Ronan.
Most pitches in the Premier League are of the same standard. So once you get out of the dressing room, it's the same thing, and you presume the equalizer of an away ground is gone, and the best team is going to win more often than not. Like the whole idea of being spooked by away support or a raucous crowd away game at night is just it's not going to be a factor this season. So that's actually a bit of a shame. I do notice that like where crowd noise notwithstanding that's being piped in, it's kind of it does dilute a little bit where like that Fulham Arsenal game, for example, Gareth, that should have been like Craven Cottage should have been hopping for that game, and Arsenal would have had to like settle down for the first 15 minutes and get to grips with the game. Whereas they just went in and played their game from minute one. And same Leeds Liverpool last week. Can you imagine what the atmosphere would have been like for that game? So exactly. It's a pity, but like I'm just glad there is football. To be fair, like it's kind of it's a bit of a bonus that 6 months ago I didn't think there'd be any football this year whatsoever. So I think we should be. I think I'm happy enough to be getting what we're getting.
Yeah,
I think though as well, it's interesting from like a coaching point of view. Like, have some teams been performing better because their coaches are more audible to the players? Like, our players being coached better. I definitely think Arsenal could be benefiting from that. But I was listening to, I was watching highlights of Sheffield United from last weekend, and it was like you could hear Wilder shouting like, "That's 4 tackles we've missed now. 4 tackles!" Like it's very audible. For I suppose for managers that do like coach throughout the game, just seems like maybe there is a marginal gain to be got from that. But I know it'd be interesting to maybe see. We've got a very small kind of we've got like a very small sample to analyze on that, so it'd be interesting maybe over the course of a season if we were to stay without fans or without a lot of fans, how that would change. Well, maybe that's a talk for another day.
Yeah, well, like I think it's going to be the most remarkable season because the post-lockdown, it was just one of those things where it wasn't an asterisk because I think most teams sort of settled into the run of things and it was going to be a surreal sort of season. But the fact that we're going to basically have a full season of this now and everyone's on an even playing field, I think it will be one of the more memorable seasons of recent years, not just for the reasons like we've been talking 99% about on the pitch matters and the personnel and tactics and all that kind of stuff, but I think in 20, 30, 40 years time people will remember this as the season with no fans, and it will be interesting to see how much of a break from the norm results are and away form and all this kind of stuff is. So I think as a project it's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Definitely. I think we better leave it there then. Must be approaching your bedtime by now, David, I'd say. But yeah, well, look, if you're listening, thanks for listening. If you're watching, thanks for watching, even though I apologise for how we all look. And we look forward to chatting to you the next time. We'll probably be changing all our predictions, but sure, look, that's what they're for.